Sheha is fine.
Sheha. I'm going to try and remember all these names. So, Sheha, how do you spell Sheha? S-H-E-H-A-H?
S-H-E-I-H-A, but the I is silent.
S-H-E...
I.
I'm going to write it. So, it's Sheha. Is that right?
Yeah, Sheha.
I'm going to write it down phonetically.
No,
Sheha.
you just ask my name.
Okay. Yeah, good. What was I going to say? I can't remember now.
Oh, we were talking about subject fields. I told you I was in...
It's really important, actually. Really important. If you get into journalism, in many ways, your field of interest, as well as journalism, is the most important thing. And people do degrees in journalism and thinking it's going to be really useful. And it is, because yours is a sort of postgraduate thing. It's more serious, this is. But people do some degrees in media, call it media. And it's not quite as valuable as doing a degree in law. So doing something in law is almost more valuable initially because it gives you a second interest. And later in your journalism career, you'll find your second interest is very, very important.
I actually got into journalism from school, so I did media as a subject in my GCA level and fell in love with media, absolutely in love with media. The ideas of radio, TV, just recording and playing, relaying information. The entire concept is very interesting. So that's why I asked my parents if there is any institution that teaches journalism, prepares you for journalism. And that's where my cousin also did it here. So she directed me here.
Yeah. Actually, thinking about it, I've always said that about media courses. But thinking about it, it's one of the things that has changed so much with online. I'm a bit old school, actually, thinking about it, in that doing a course in media these days is actually really important because of all the different types of media. Whereas when I was recruiting people in the 90s, early 2000s, we were looking for journalists. So we weren't looking for people with multimedia skills. And thinking about it, that's changed, actually. So I take it all back about doing a degree in media. I'm a dinosaur. Okay, all right. Okay, good to meet you.
Yeah. Hello, sir.
Hello.
Yeah, I'm Hussein.
Hold a second. Hussein?
Yes.
And
I'm a journalist student.
Sorry?
I'm a journalist student here.
Okay, yeah.
And I have been to Germany for an exchange program when I was schooling, and I have friends contacted in Germany.
It's just me. Can you speak a bit slower? It doesn't come through very well.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, sir.
Okay. No, just keep it quite slow because I can't always hear through the signal.
Ah, okay. We're working on it, sir, please.
Okay, you're Hussein, is that right?
Yes.
Okay, Hussein. Now tell me that I need something which will remind me of your name. Because Sheha was telling me that she has a law degree, and so I've put law degree next door to her name. Is there something that can remind me that it's you?
Yes, I'm really focusing on educating youngsters to have a good future. And I'm an English teacher, and I really teach in a school also. I teach IGCSE Cambridge for international school in my area.
Okay.
And already I have contact in Europe where they are independent journalists.
Okay, good. So now I know who you are.
Thank you.
That's okay. Do ask any questions you want at any time.
Okay, sir. Sure. And sir, I have another question. Can I ask it now?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, far away.
Yeah. How about the FND, functional neurological disorder, when analyzing the European people?
Well, is that so? You have to keep it very slow, Hussein. I've lost the sound. Hussein, I can't hear you. Yeah, I can hear you now. So did you say something about Europe, Hussein?
Yeah, because according to my examination, I believe FND patients are more considered there, but the medical team in Sri Lanka is not, they are going not fine. And I have witnessed an FND patient here. So I believe, according to my analysis, there are a lot in Europe, but where Sri Lankan, they don't consider and they don't have proper examination in the medical unit.
Do you mean by state medical help? Do you mean medication that is helped by the government?
Okay, sir. Yeah, thank you.
So your name is?
I'm Theruni.
Tyranny?
Theruni, yes. Pretty close.
Can you spell that?
T-H-E.
T-H, slowly. T-H.
T-H.
Yeah.
E.
Yeah.
R-U.
Yeah.
N.
Yeah.
Double E.
Tyranny.
Theruni. Yes.
Tyranny or tyranny?
I'm Theruni.
Okay, Tyranny. I'm here. And Tyranny, is there any way do you have an interest other than journalism? I can hear you. I can hear you now.
Oh, I like playing Scrabble.
Oh, right, excellent. I like playing Scrabble too.
Oh, that's nice.
Do you play online Scrabble, Tyranny?
Online Scrabble?
Yeah.
I do actually.
Yeah, cool. Okay, well, we'll start playing after the meeting.
Could you repeat again, please?
Well, after today, we'll start playing Scrabble together online.
Sure, let's do it.
You'll have to give me your name or contact details.
I'll let you know.
Do you have any questions? Just to start with.
Oh no,
No, it's okay. You don't have to. It means I now know who you are. So I now know who Shia is.
Nick, we were just wondering, since we really wanted to meet you, we were wondering where you are right now.
Where? I am in Ambalangoda.
Ambalangoda. Ah.
A friend of mine runs a restaurant hotel in Ambalangoda. And so, yeah, I'm staying there.
Is there a pretty view?
I have, but hold a second. I'll show you my view. I've got a blind. I've got a blind here, so I'm going to have to raise my blind.
Sorry for the trouble.
Sorry. So you're gonna be impressed by this, I think. This.
Sri Lanka does have some pretty views.
This is my view. I'm just trying to remember. Okay. This.
You have a shirt.
Do you see my view?
Wow.
Yeah.
Very pretty.
So thank you. So when we have lunch, I'll go swimming. I might go
Our
swimming.
class is very happy that you're wearing our t-shirt.
It's very smart. Thank you. I'll take it home with me and show it to people in the UK. So, Sheha, you're doing a law degree.
Yes.
And you've got a blue headscarf on. Is that right?
Yes, that's right.
Okay. And Hussein, somewhere. Hussein, you wear
Hello,
glasses.
sir. Yeah.
Yeah, you wear glasses. That reminds me who you are.
Hello.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, sir.
So Hussein, you wear glasses and you're in a blue t-shirt.
Yes.
Okay. And Tyranny you've got a ponytail. Okay. Now, who is the Hussein? Who is the girl with a checked shirt behind you?
Hi, I'm Natasha.
Okay, Natasha. And Natasha, do you have any other interests other than journalism? Just so I know. Okay, Natasha. and I've got you. You're in a check shirt. Okay, cool. Anybody else? The woman with the red headscarf, burgundy headscarf. Yeah, you're Aisha. Aisha.
Yeah. So far 8. There's more to come.
Okay, fine. But we'll start. Can you ask Milroy if we should start?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can. Yeah.
Okay. Good morning to all of you. I'm sorry about this because he's supposed to do the lesson physically, but unfortunately, his busy tour plan, he couldn't inform. I know it's very difficult to conduct a 6-hour lesson online, but we apologize for that. But we'll try to do our best. But hopefully, he will come back again another day and meet you all. So I don't have to give an introduction about him. I sent you the brief, and I will hand over to him to continue with it. Right? Later we can have that. And when you want to communicate him as he doing now, you have to hold the mic, otherwise he can't hear it. To make sure that, and we have some practicals also. I have kept everything ready there, and we have marker pen. And if you get 15 numbers, we will divide into 3 groups. And then you have to present, you have to do your practical and you have to present there at the door. So I can zoom in and I can show him, right? If you have any question, you can directly ask him. He's very friendly, so no issues, right? Okay. Jeep, it's over to you.
Okay. Well, I am Nick Gibbs. Nick, as in Nick Gibbs. Can you see all this? You've got the spread, the presentation.
I.
Okay. So I pronounce it Daye.
Gayatri.
Okay. Can I just call you Di? Okay, I'll try to understand that, but if I get it wrong, I'm very sorry. Okay.
So if it's difficult for you, she's also called Veena, so you can call her Veena as well.
That Veena's much easier for me.
Okay.
No. Okay, Veena. Can I just ask you, Veena, is it very cold in Colombo today that you're wearing a woolly hat?
No, sir.
Okay, it's not cold here. Okay. Okay, can you all hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, good. Now, my name is Nick Gibbs. I have all my working career for 30 years, edited magazines. And editing magazines is what I love best in the world. But I started as a reporter, a journalist on a local paper, just in the local rural town that I lived. And after I did that for a bit, I became what's called a sub-editor, and that means that you're involved in the production of the newspaper. And then I became a freelance journalist for a bit, writing for various magazines in London. They were free magazines, which meant they were distributed from house to house or street to street with lots of advertising in them. Then I became a writer in what's called a business magazine, so a magazine that is produced for companies and things like that. And then I began editing magazines in what is called the specialist consumer market, which means, and here is an example of a magazine I now publish, which is called Quercus. And it's a magazine for people who work with wood. And can you all see that copy of the magazine? There?
Yes, sir,
Yeah.
we can see that.
Okay. In fact, I see that Veena, you've got a copy.
Venus, you have a copy, Lou. Yeah,
So-
we have a copy too.
Okay. So for the moment, can you stop reading it? Because it's too interesting. and you won't be and you won't be concentrating on the class. In 2014, stop it, Vina, you're reading my magazine. That's better. In 2014, I had a very bad cycle crash, and I had to stop publishing the magazines that I was publishing at the time. And then for 6 years, I couldn't cope with all the complications. It's a very editing and publishing magazines is quite a complicated thing. And I couldn't cope with it after my accident because I landed on my head and was in a coma for 10 days. But I forced myself to start publishing this magazine a few years ago. And so it's quite new and it's survived for a while. Anyway, I'm now going to talk to you about, right, now, when you start in journalism, a small way of doing a magazine is to produce a section within a magazine. So, for instance, this is my favorite magazine, okay? And it's called Red Bulletin, and it's produced. Do you know what Red Bull is? This drink, Red Bull. Have any of you drunk it? Well, it's produced by Red Bull, and it has two functions. On one side, it's a free magazine, which means that it's handed around at shops and things like that. But it's always also by subscription. So I get a subscription because I like it so much. And it's got lots of really good features. But it also at the back has a section called Venture. And Venture magazine, Venture is just a section, but it's full of really good features and then also quite small pieces like that. Now, the small pieces like that are produced by, in many cases, young journalists who are quite new to journalism. And there are lots of other sections like that. So, sorry, I've got them all lined on the floor. So this is Lanka Woman magazine. Do any of you know that magazine? Yeah, you can buy it. Can you buy it? Is it easy to get in Colombo? Because I'm told that magazines are quite difficult to buy. Anyway, in there, there is a section. Okay, this section is a very long section, this, and it's all about events, okay? And so it has one event after another. Now, this is the sort of thing that when you're a young journalist, you can start writing for. Okay. What's your name? The last student to arrive. I can't quite get that. Okay, I need a short version. How do I spell? Sorry, I can hardly hear you. Might have to put the mic.
Everybody calls me Neshi.
Everyone calls you
Neshi. Neshi.
Leshi.
Yeah.
Oh, that's easy. So you're Leshi. Leshi or Lesha?
Neshi.
Okay.
N, yeah.
Yeah. And you have a stripy shirt. There's a chance I remember who you are. Okay. So I will show you this section of Lanka Woman. So this has got lots of short pieces, quite a lot of them. Now, most of them at the moment are written, and I'll see if you can see this. Can you see that it's written by somebody? Can you see that? Written by Mandule Mendes. Can you see that? Yeah? Can you see that it's written by Mandula Mendes?
Yes.
Yeah? Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, she writes, or he, I think it's a she, sorry, writes an
She.
awful lot. She, okay. Do you know her?
No.
No. So she writes a lot of the articles in here. And so she takes responsibility for this section of the magazine. Now, if you have an ambition in magazines, it would be, for the moment, to edit a section of the magazine. And then you would write quite a lot of these small pieces like this, but you'd also commission some other people to write pieces. So this, for instance, is a longer piece, and it is written by somebody called Ronali. Hold a second, I must get my glasses. Okay, I have my glasses so I can read. She is called Ronali. Okay, can you see that? Yeah. Nod if you can see that. I don't think you can hear me. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Can.
Okay, I need somebody there, one of you, to be able to say if you can hear me and that you see what you want to see.
Okay, I'll do
Okay.
it.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so you can see that that one is written by Ronali, yes?
Yes.
Okay, well, Mandali Mendes will have commissioned Ronali to write that piece. So the role of the magazine section editor is a bit of editing and a bit of writing, and it's a really good experience. And for the moment, that should be one of your ambitions, or it could be one of your ambitions. So to do that, you need to, and later I'm going to ask you to do this as part of your practical exercise. So you're going to have to work as a group, and you're going to have to write something for a magazine section, which I am going to tell you what section each group has to do. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Good. Okay, so you'll have to build a team. You'll have to choose a theme, build a team, choose a theme, create a plan of what you're going to produce, come up with a list of features, what you're going to put in there, and present your proposal to the publisher, who is me. Okay?
Okay.
Okay. And so we have another student. And your name?
Hi, I'm Minaza.
Your name is?
Minaza.
What's a short version of that?
You can call me Mini.
Minnie. Okay, Minnie. And then you're in a white shirt.
Yeah, blue and white strips.
Yeah.
Yeah. Blue plus white. Okay. Okay. So we've just spoken about making a magazine section. Milroy, can I have the next slide? Have we got the next slide? Because I actually at the moment can't see. Ah, here we go. Here we go. Okay. So if we have the next slide, please, Milroy. Now, as I was telling one of you, I would, because I've been editing for 30 years, it means that I'm a bit old school, a bit, from another time. You could say I'm a dinosaur of magazines. So I've had to have a think about new trends that have happened recently, and that people who take a degree in media or that sort of thing will understand. So some of the things that have changed is obviously you have digital publishing. And Milroy, if you could show people later or at the break, is Quercus, the magazine that one of you has, one second, that Vina has got, my copy of Quercus. Can you show that, Vina?
Yeah.
Okay. Vina, can you show everybody my magazine?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, done.
Yay, well done, well done. So that magazine, and I'll tell you later, is available on something called Pocket Mags. And Pocket Mags is a way that I can publish my magazine for anyone to read. And we now have as many subscribers to Quercus online through Pocket Mags as we do in print, because print is very expensive, as I'm sure you know. And digital has lots of advantages because it means you can put digital links and things like that into the magazine, which we wouldn't have been able to do when I was publishing magazines a while before my accident, which happened 6 years ago. So, and lots of stuff has happened in media since then. One of the things, I'll take a drink. One of the things that has happened is social media. And social media has been both an advantage and a disadvantage to magazines. An advantage is that there's lots more information. So you can learn much more about your particular specialism than you would have before. So I've been able to meet online mainly through Instagram, lots and lots of people and companies that I would never, ever have discovered without Instagram and Facebook and that sort of thing. And it means that I've been able to get specialists who aren't necessarily journalists to write for my magazine. The downside is, the disadvantage is that people aren't as interested in magazines because they get so much information from Instagram and Facebook. And it's very quick information, and they get photos and they get video. And so magazines aren't nearly as important. So we lose some readers who previously would have gone to magazines. And some of the pages, which were very common in woodworking, any magazines, are pages like the letters pages, where readers send in letters, or the question and answer pages when readers send in questions, because those questions and letters are now done in social media. And when I was first publishing magazines, those pages were really important. And if you were publishing a good magazine, you'd have lots of letters and lots of questions. Another thing, and that would attract more readers, because that was their only way of finding out what the community of those people was doing. The other really important thing that's changed through the new trends in media is advertising. And so now there is so much advertising online that is very, very difficult to get advertising for print magazines. And that used to be the income, about half the income for a magazine was advertising. So people like my daughters, who now work in digital marketing, and they spend their time analyzing adverts that happen online in Instagram and things like that. So they know exactly which advertising works and which advertising doesn't work, which in the past, one of the problems with print advertising is very often you don't actually know if the advertising has worked. And so now advertisers are less encouraged and less likely to advertise in print magazines, which makes it all very difficult and means there is far less money in magazines. And as lots of people like the magazines printed rather than online, it makes the whole industry of magazines very difficult. So you're going to have to find your way of getting involved. And one of the ways is to be very specialist and have other interests as well as journalism, or just be a very good journalist. And so one of the things that's happened is that newsstands, which were the way to buy newspapers and magazines, have reduced considerably. And so it's also much more difficult to buy magazines. And as I said earlier, the costs have increased. And now the costs have increased by paper. And because you're producing fewer magazines, the cost per magazine that you produce has gone up. Now that's the end of that slide. Are there any questions before I move on to the next slide? Okay, good. We can move. Okay, Mel, can you move to the next slide? Okay. So what are magazines? So magazines are, and this is relating to when I was talking about letters and questions, they're clubs. People want to join a club. So in the case of, where's it gone? In the case of Red Bulletin, I want to be included, and it's completely inappropriate really, but I want to be included in a really cool club of people who know about adventure and sport and that sort of thing. So a recent article was about women rugby players, and there are very similar sorts of articles. And so that really, I'm interested in that, but I'm also interested in that section on venture that I showed you previously, because I can buy lots of really cool clothes from it, and it looks really exciting, and I feel young. So, which is, I'm not. So I like feeling a member of a club, and the club is one which I would never otherwise be a member of. So also magazines can inspire people, and they can educate people, and they can entertain people. And this is really, really important part. Thanks, Nora. This is a really important part of journalism and magazines, is to think, am I inspiring somebody to do something? Am I educating somebody so they can do something better? And am I entertaining somebody so they enjoy what they're reading? And when you're a journalist, it's always important, particularly in magazine journalism, to think of your reader and what does the reader want to read. So it's not just a case of what you think is important. You must always think, what will the reader want to read? And in two ways, and this is the next point, you must think about what the reader needs to hear or read and what the reader wants to read. So needs are things like people needing to know how to drive a car, or needing to know how to cook something, or needing to know what to buy, something they need to buy. Now, wants for a particular purpose, but wants are people enjoying reading about some feature or interview with somebody who they don't really need to read about, but they want to read about them. And so there are needs and there are wants. And if possible, you should bear that in mind. What do people need to read? And what do people want to read? And afterwards, not all articles, and when you're a journalist, a young journalist writing reporting for a newspaper, maybe a local newspaper, you think to yourself, what is you want a call to action? Now, this isn't necessarily the case with reporting, but in my world, how I want my articles to be, I want my readers to end up with the article being inspired to do something. So it might be reading a book, it might be going online to a website, or finding out someone to follow on Instagram, but it's what's called a call to action. And I'm always trying to make sure that what I write inspires and educates a reader to make a call to action. Does that make sense? Hopefully. Okay, Noah, can I have the next slide? Okay, so just so you know how things have built up, the history of magazines, it started really entirely on the basis of news. So it was, and I don't know if you know what a town crier was, but he was somebody who, or she, but mainly he, I have to admit, was somebody who would go around a town and shout out what the news is. And so he was called a town crier. And there was also, there'd be news sheets that would be printed and pinned to or stuck to notice boards within a village or within a town. And those were entirely based on news. Then gradually, newspapers and magazines started in introducing the idea of people and talking more in a more humane way about what people do. So it wasn't just news, it was involving people and then involving features. So people would begin to interview people, say what people were doing, and that sort of thing. So, and that was the start of newspapers becoming more like magazines. And so I'll show you the first issue of the Sunday Times in and I'll show you the issue. I've lost it now. This is an issue of the Sunday Times in Britain. Sunday Times is one of the biggest magazines in Britain. And I had a copy of the Sunday Times here in Sri Lanka a minute ago. And it's a good magazine, but it has, I believe, been reduced in size and therefore content by increased costs. Anyway, this is the first issue of the Sunday Times, and it was all about Winston Churchill. So it was a supplement with the Sunday Times, and they were called colour supplements because for the first time there was colour involved in newspapers as a supplement. And these now look like this. This is the Sunday Times magazine in the UK now. And in the first one, the one about Churchill, all it was pictures of Churchill. Well, not actually the back. They're like this. This is a very famous photograph of Winston Churchill with Roosevelt and Stalin. No, not Stalin, but anyway, it's a famous picture. And that's what this magazine was about, nothing more. The modern Sunday Times is full of much more deeper articles. So like this. So this is a feature about how to save the department store. And I suspect you have the same problem in Sri Lanka, which is that shops, particularly shops that sell lots of different things, are having a very difficult time in the UK. So this is a feature and it goes in great depth like this. So this is a long feature. The other thing, and you'll have to be quite experienced before you're writing that sort of thing. And they also have what are called columns. So this is one person telling the readers what they're doing at any one time. And you probably have this sort of thing. And it's now a big issue in the UK. And that's the personal side of magazines, which were never in, as I said, the first issue of Sunday Times. And then what began to happen is magazines became more specialist. So they were specialists who, and I'm going to have to take some more, in a particular subject. So in my case, they became specialists in woodworking. But there were other ones that became specialists in film, in music, in travel, in education, lots of different subjects that they became specialists in. So for instance, this magazine, which is a very, very glossy magazine, and it's called The World of Interiors. It's a very famous magazine in the UK, and it's all about interior design. And what its strength is the photos. So people, this is largely a want. People want to read about interiors, but there is an element of need. In some people are renovating a house or something like that. And in here, there will be articles. I can't see them now, but there will be articles about. And so one need is they want to go to an event. And this one is the decorative fair. And so this is an event they need to go to learn more about interior design. So that's specialist magazines. And specialist magazines are magazines that I've always enjoyed most. And because when I first started publishing and editing and writing for specialist magazines, I really enjoyed having a close correspondence with readers and being really close to readers. And I was talking to the first person to arrive this morning, being very, very diligent and good, arriving early, was Shiha. Shiha, are you there? I'm sure you're there. Yeah. And she was saying how she is having a law degree, is doing a law degree, as well as being interested in journalism. Now, the law degree she is doing might one day be very useful, and she might start writing about law as a journalist. And as you go into your career, it's very, very valuable to have a specialism. And so in the past, sometimes these days, because of all the changes in media, a degree in media or journalism is actually more attractive. But when I first started editing magazines, I was more interested in employing people who had a particular specialism. So if they were economics or history or maybe a science, I was more interested in them because they had a special knowledge about a special subject matter. And that's really valuable for your career, your long-term career as a journalist, because you'll start maybe as a reporter on a local newspaper, but gradually you'll become more specialist and you'll get more work later on in life. It's not important for you now, but it might be important in the future. So Milroy, can you move on to the next slide? Okay, so this is, and it sort of says what I've just said. So what is magazine journalism? Now, I think you are all learning to be journalists in lots of different media. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right.
So you're learning to write for different media. So you're learning to write short pieces and you're learning to write longer pieces. Is that fair to say? Yes? Is that right? You're right. You're learning to write for lots of different...
We kind of did. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, okay. And that relates to the first thing, which is news writing and reporting. So when I was first a journalist, I was writing short news pieces of, say, 100, 200 words on what somebody had done locally, what, you know, if there'd been a car crash, or we would go to the courts and we would report on court cases and things like that. So we were taking information down and we were using notepads like this. Do you all have notepads? Do you have notepads like this?
Yeah.
Yeah, good. Because that's one of the most important things for journalists. And do you learn shorthand? Do you learn shorthand? Yes? No?
We don't know what's shorthand, sir.
Okay, then don't worry. Shorthand is a way, and I don't use it, and most people don't use it this day because you can record almost everything. So don't worry. But when I was first a journalist, used something called shorthand, which was a way of converting letters and phrases into symbols, and you converted it into symbols. And it's a bit like, say, Cyrillic alphabets, and then you could very quickly read it later, and you could write it quickly. Do you type? Can you type? Can you all type? Do you know how to type?
Type as in using a laptop? Yeah.
Yeah, using a laptop. And how many of you can type without looking at the keys? Hands up.
Raise your hand. How many of you can type without looking at the keys?
It's called touch typing. So 4 of you, say, can do it?
5.
Okay, 5. Okay. Now, I don't want to tell Milroy grandmother to suck eggs, which is a phrase, but that was the most important skill I ever learned, ever learned. is touch typing, and so you can type with your fingers, with all your fingers. And for these days, for using laptops and things like that, is absolutely crucial. And it helps being able to touch type on your phone as well. Even though it's your thumbs mainly, because you can touch type on a typewriter, on a laptop, and I have one of these. Can you see this? It's a miniature a keyboard, and I use this for working on an iPad and things like that, because it means I can type very quickly and I can type without looking at my fingers. So it means I can type looking at the screen all the time. So I don't have to worry about writing the wrong thing or the right thing. Just as a point, so that you know, I hate touchscreen keyboards. And I think it has been ruined. It's reduced our ability to type fast and accurately. So I hate them. And I'll show you. 1 second.
Chips?
My iPhone here, my iPhone 5, it's very old.
I'm sorry to disturb you. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
What about if you can use the translator, Google Translator, because we can voice it and copy it later and paste it?
I guess if there's a language issue, yeah, that's good. You can do that. I use something called Otter, and that takes something you've written. So if you record an interview, which I do now, and you've recorded this, I know. And if you record an interview, you can then take the recording and put it into something called Otter, which you have to pay for a subscription to. And that then converts what you have, the interview, into script. So you can then slow down the amount of time you need to do to type in. My warning is that Otter isn't very good all the time at converting words into text. And quite often, unless the words are very clear, the interview is very clear, you'll get some strange words in Otter. So it has advantages, but it also has disadvantages. So is that what you meant, Milroy? Right, is that what you meant by Google Translator? That you can you can convert words into text? I can't hear you. Okay. Anyway, so yeah, so touch typing. Can you hear me? Can someone put their hand up if you can hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. Okay. Fine. Okay. So all I was saying is touch typing is really important. So then, as I was mentioning earlier, you then start, once you've really experienced at news writing and reporting, say in newspapers, local newspaper, you then are qualified to go into other types of media, into online. And these days it might go the other way. So you start writing online for Instagram, and then gradually you learn how to do that better and the writing better. And you can move into magazines and newspapers and other forms of media. Then the next thing you would do is you would learn specialist writing, and you would learn how to do reviews or say books and films, because you would become an expert in certain areas. To start with, you wouldn't do that because you wouldn't have the experience to do it. But once you begin to be able to review books, you will start to be in a position when you can write freelance and you can earn more money out of your journalism. Once that happens, the next thing you can do is feature writing, which means that you can write the longer articles for magazines and things like that. Now, Milroy, if you can go on to the next slide. These are the types of magazines that you will go through. And one of them is a business magazine, So, if I can find it. This is a business magazine, it's Sri Lankan business magazine. And this is for many different types of businesses and companies who want to find information about businesses. Now, there will be other business magazines, and I haven't got them here because I find it difficult, that might be involved in a business that produces cars, or business that those sort of things, or business that builds things for woodworkers, carpenters, or for plumbers, or for anything like that, specialisms. And sometimes I started my career working for a magazine that that is a business magazine for companies that produce furniture. So for me, the fact that I knew a little bit about woodworking, because my parents had a furniture business, meant that I could start my career in a business magazine about furniture. Now, the advantage of this is that I was able to start writing as a journalist quite early on, while I was still at journalism college. So like you, I did a course in journalism after I had done a degree. In my case, it was a degree in economics. So I was in a good position to, are you going closer to the screen? 2 people? Okay. Okay. Is that because the sound is bad at the back?
No, I can't see clearly.
Oh,
I have bad eyes.
Okay. Okay, I understand. Sorry. So business magazines are really good for people like you. They may not sound the most exciting magazines to be working on, but from a magazine perspective and also online, they're a really, really good way for you to get into journalism. So as I say, so someone like Shia, who might get into a magazine for lawyers, for instance, and she would use her experience or as learning to be a lawyer to be able to bring a little bit of specialism and also learn to be a journalist at the same time. Now, in the UK, there are quite a lot of internships for this. So you don't get paid. And does that happen in Sri Lanka? Can anyone tell me?
Interns get paid in Sri Lanka.
So if you go and you spent, say, a month from college, from where you are, and you found a magazine that would give you work experience, would you get paid or not paid for that?
We would probably.
You probably get paid. Oh, that's good. Because
The minimum wage.
Okay, the minimum wage. Okay, that is typical in the UK. In fact, there is law now in the UK that means you have to be paid. And is that Sheeny who I'm talking to?
Ishini. Yeah.
Okay, my list of people and what they're wearing seems to be working. And are you sitting next door to Leshy?
Leshi, yeah.
Excellent. Okay, it is working. Anyway, so I went and worked for a business magazine, and quite soon after, so I was still at college, and I was still with my postgraduate, like some of you, and I was asked to work for the magazine full time and edit a section in the magazine because I was both becoming good at writing, but also I had a specialism in furniture making. In the end, I refused that job because I turned it down because I was still at college and my ambition was not to work in business magazines. But if you're starting out, you should definitely consider this as a potential way for you to get a job. So do you have business magazines in Sri Lanka? I presume you do?
Yeah, we have Business Today. My father is the creative director there.
Okay. So your father has been in Business Today?
Yes, he's the creative director of the company.
Okay.
The magazine.
And I think Business Today publishes other magazines as well?
Yeah, Explore Sri Lanka, Serendip.
Okay, so it publishes that. Is that right?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so I think, is Explore published for the tourism board, or who is it, or to sell, or what? Or is it free? Well, why is it published? Do you know?
It's to sell.
It's to sell on newsstands. You can buy it in a shop.
Most of them.
Okay, and what sort of shops in Sri Lanka sell magazines? Because I haven't found it easy to find them.
Mostly bookshops and those supermarkets and places. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay. So Keels, somebody like Keels, would they send magazines?
Yes, you can find it.
Oh, okay. Because I found my magazine, I stole my magazines from a coffee shop in Kandy, opposite the lake. And sometimes doctors' waiting rooms and dentists' waiting rooms have magazines. And I steal quite a lot of magazines from there, which is very naughty. But usually I try and take the old issues, not the latest issues. So all you have to do is go to a coffee shop and you will find quite a few magazines sometimes. And don't feel guilty if you steal some of them. And one way you do it is you put it down the back of your trousers. So when you're reading it, you're having your coffee, when the person who runs the coffee shop isn't noticing, you quickly put a copy of the magazine down your trousers. And in the UK, I've had, and look it up, my favorite magazine that other than Red Bulletin is a magazine called Vanity Fair. And if you look up Vanity Fair, it is a really, really brilliant magazine. And it has, if you can get it online, it's worth getting online. And perhaps you can get one free as a sample online. And it has a really good mix of regular pages, sections, and features. And the regulars are really important for the magazine. They're the pages that readers go to immediately. They go to the first. They're interested in the features, but very often readers will go to the regulars first. And I would have a magazine, and they're the articles which are called the columns. So I showed you in this magazine, in the Sunday Times, this article by this column here, which is by a writer called Matt Rudd. Okay, can you see that? Can you read that?
Yeah.
He writes a column in the Sunday Times every week. Okay, now one of the editors, and this isn't relevant to you as young journalists, but editors want to find people who will write a really good column and sometimes are famous. When I first published a woodworking magazine, I launched a woodworking magazine. I've launched many, many magazines. I've launched magazines in computer magazines. I've launched magazines, so the first issues of a sailing magazine. I even launched a magazine about cross stitch. Do you know what cross stitch is? Like embroidery?
Oh, yeah.
So I launched a magazine for caravans. I presume do you have caravans in?
Yes, I have, not here,
Yeah.
but I have witnessed that in Germany.
You have a caravan in Germany?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I at one stage launched a magazine for people who have caravans, and it was called Caravan Plus. And I went into the magazine to help publish the magazine. I wasn't the editor. I was an editor-in-chief, and I was responsible to launch magazines across the whole of this publishing company. It was a very big publishing company. And every time there was a launch of a publishing magazine, I would go in and help the team launch the magazine. And one of the magazines was the Caravan magazine. So when I first helped it, I thought that I ought to know about caravans. So I got in the caravan and spent a weekend in the caravan. And my wife at the time and I decided that we ought to take the names of typical caravan owners. And we decided that because it's really important when you're publishing or launching a magazine that you have a typical reader. And this is true of all publishing, online, anything, is to have what you think is your typical reader. Of course, you have lots of readers that are beyond this, that go to one side or the other and don't. So they very occasionally have caravans, or they go on holiday in a caravan. But the one that you want is your typical reader for Caravan Plus, was somebody who owns a caravan and goes about in their caravan fairly often. Okay, does that make sense? Hussein, is it Hussein?
Yes, sir.
Okay, well, there you go. I remembered your name.
Yeah.
And you're a teacher, is that right, Hussein?
Yes, and better forget my name, sir.
Thank you very much. That's one of the skills of being an editor, is you know who your readers are. Okay, but I'm not going to say who my typical reader is of your crowd, because you're all typical readers. So in your case, I'm not going to say one of you is my typical reader or typical a member of the crowd. But in the case of the magazine, I will. And anyway, in the caravan section, my wife and I called ourselves Barry and Sheila, because Barry and Sheila are typical names of the sort of people we decided who own a caravan in the UK. So we became Barry and Sheila, and we went in a caravan for a couple of weekends to experience what it was like to be in a caravan. And it meant that I had much better experience at helping launch the magazine. And when I launched a sailing magazine, I'd never gone in a sailing boat ever before in my life. And I hated sailing because I don't like the sea very much, and I'm frightened of deep sea. But I decided, one of the contributors to the magazine, and he was the most famous contributor, said, Nick, you have to go in a sailing boat. So he took me in a beautiful, beautiful sailing boat across the English Channel. I don't know if any of you know the English Channel, but it's between England and France. And there's a tunnel now. So there's a tunnel under the channel. So it means that the English and the French are joined. I don't know if you know how the English and the French relate to one another, but they're sort of enemies, and they're sort of metaphorical enemies. And I don't know if this is true, so I'm very careful to say this, whether that's the case between Sri Lanka and India, that you have a slight tendency of not liking each other as well as loving each other. And that's the truth with the French and the English. We love each other, but we also slightly dislike each other. Anyway, and I can't remember why I said this. Oh, it was about sailing. And one of the symptoms of having my head injury is that sometimes I will say something and I'll wander off the slides that Milroy is showing, and I'll forget where the story started because my concentration is poor. So I apologize if ever I tell a story and then I forget what the story started. Milroy, I'm afraid I can see the slide as well, but that only helps a little bit because I'll go so far off the subject that I'll completely forget where we started. Anyway, I was talking to sailing magazines, and so I had to learn who a typical reader of a sailing magazine might be. And so I was taking this to the channel, and I hated it. But the contributor told me something which has stayed with me all my life. And we were approaching France quite closely in the morning because we'd gone all night. And we approached France, and I said, where are we going to? And he said, Nick, in a sailing boat, you never go to somewhere, you always go towards somewhere. And I've thought this is a life lesson for the rest of ever since I heard this, in that you're not going to somewhere, you're going towards somewhere. And for me, it's been a good philosophy in life. And I suspect, but I don't know, maybe it's a Buddhist philosophy as well, that you go towards somewhere, not to somewhere. Anyway, it's very important to have your typical reader. And when I was launching a computer magazine, it was a PlayStation magazine. Do you know what PlayStations are? I presume you do. Computer games magazine. Yeah, you do. You do know?
Yes, but earlier there are, but even now.
Even though, sorry, what? You still play?
Yes.
Okay, I won't comment. When you, I decided that I had to learn how to use the PlayStation, and so I learned by doing one of that was about driving a car. It was a rally driving game, and I got car sick playing it, so I had to stop playing it. Anyway, so and this is where I've completely forgotten where I started, and I think it was to do. Where did I start? Types of magazine. Anyway, so business magazines. That's it. Business magazines are a good way to use specialist knowledge. Contract magazines. Now, I thought that Explore Sri Lanka is what's known as a contract magazine, and I thought at first that it was being published for, say, the Sri Lankan Tourist Board, and it was a way for the Sri Lanka. I thought it was free. Maybe it was free because I stole my copy, but I thought it was free because it was something that readers could pick up and would learn about Sri Lanka. And that comes to the next point, which is free advertising magazines. So a typical contract magazine would be a magazine that is published for a supermarket. So we have them in the UK, and they're published for a supermarket or something like a supermarket, and they're full of recipes and things like that. And consumers will buy one when they leave the supermarket, and they'll pick it up as they leave the supermarket. It's full of recipes and ways to encourage the reader to go back to that supermarket. Similar is free advertising magazines, and this is where I also started my writing career, and it was in magazines that are taken around a rural area, not a rural area, but a local area, and they're full of local adverts. This is also a really good way to start your journalist career, to write for them. And this is also a way, if you start by writing regular articles, that you will gain a reputation and you will start writing more important articles. For instance, when I first started writing for a free advertising magazine, quite quickly I was given travel jobs, and one of them was to go to Germany, and I was quite quickly given a job to go on a travel piece to write about Germany, and it was really exciting. It was really fun. Actually, what I was talking about, and this is, sorry, I forgot this, was that I was talking about regular articles and columnists. People have regular articles. Now, when I launched a woodworking magazine in about 1992, which may be before most of you were born. Okay, you can tell me, who was born between 1992? Were you all born between 1992? Was anyone born between 1992?
No.
No, none of you. Okay. Well, in 1992, I published a magazine. I launched a magazine about woodwork, and this time I did know that. Anyway, I was searching for a contributor who would write regularly. Hussein, were you born between 1992, before 1992? Your hand went up. Okay. Have you got a question, Hussein? No.
Yes, I have a question, sir. It is just your initial part of life that you started as a wood carving craft and these things, right?
Okay.
Yeah, even my father started as a woodcutter, and now
Okay.
he's a successful businessman.
Okay, yeah,
So
that's good.
as a journalist student, I ask you, why do you portray you as a woodcutter and wood carving art in media and this stuff?
Okay. Well, my parents bought a business in 1969, which is also before most of you were born, I suspect. Maybe even all of you before 1969, even perhaps before your parents were born. Anyway, my parents bought a business in 1969, repairing the seats of chairs. And the seats of chairs are caned. Do you know what caning is, some of you? In fact, a lot of your chairs are caned in Sri Lanka, I think. Is that right, Hussein?
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
right.
Yeah. Anyway, so my parents bought this very small business, and I learned to do some woodwork and to make chairs from there. And then at school, we had workshop at school. And so I did some woodwork at school. And the next woodwork I did was I was in London. So I learned, okay, would you be interested to learn how I became a journalist? Yeah? Do you want me to tell you how I became a journalist? Anyone?
Sir, could you repeat that? We couldn't
Yep.
quite hear you.
Would you like to learn how I became a journalist?
Yes,
Yes,
please.
please.
Yes.
Okay. When I was at university, I discovered that the most popular place to be at university was in the careers advice office, because they had the best cafe there and they sold the best coffee in the university. So I went to the careers advice office to get the best coffee in the university. But I decided, because I obviously couldn't just buy coffee at the careers advice office, I decided that I ought to actually get some advice about careers. And in those days, there was a computer program, and you put in all your details. So how often you wanted to, what hours you wanted to work, things like that. Not your height and weight, but things like when you wanted to work, what type of work you wanted to do, did you want to be creative? Anyway, I put in my statistic, and it said you want to be a journalist. And I had never written anything very much. In fact, when I was at school, people said that I couldn't write and I was no good at writing. But I thought, well, stuff it. I'm going to show the people at school who taught me that I can become a journalist. And I was frustrated. I wasn't frustrated. I thought this is a good opportunity to prove that I could be a writer. So I started by thinking, how can I be a writer? And I started writing for the university radio station, because actually there's quite a lot of similarity between radio stations and magazines. They're clubs, they look at certain particular subject matters, they want to involve readers, they have a particular listener who they concentrate, and they have a good mix of news and of features. So I became a reporter, a news reporter for the university radio station. And I went on and then I started interviewing people. So it meant that I was doing a bit of interview, a bit of news reporting. And one of the first stories that I wrote was about a student in the university who was a communist. And he was very famous in the university for being a communist and protesting for communism at the university, which was quite rare at my school and at my university. Anyway, one time people were so angry with him that they delivered. He opened the door, and opened the door, and somebody had sent a coffin to him as a symbol, a metaphor of how disliked he was at the university. And he was very angry. So I interviewed him as a news story for the magazine. But then I started doing sports reporting and features about sports, and then I started producing articles by using the tape. We used very old tape in those days. And so we had to splice the tape, we had to do production things. So I became both a producer and also a reporter. So then I left university, and I decided by then I did want to be a journalist. So I left university and I went to London, because in those days, all I wanted to do was go to London. And so I wanted to be a journalist, but I didn't know how to become a journalist. I wanted to become a journalist, but I also wanted to be a dispatch rider on motorbikes, because I loved motorbikes. And I thought riding in London, being a dispatch rider, taking letters, in those days, there was no such thing. Yeah? Hussein? Was you? Oh, sorry, I thought Hussein was asking a question. you're not.
Me?
It's okay.
You want me to ask?
Sorry?
Yeah. Can I get the mic?
Okay.
You can hear from me, right? Yeah, hi, from here. Yes, sir.
Yeah?
Yeah,
You-
and I have to tell you, I have to appreciate you having a proper mentality, going down, but you are growing. Alhamdulillah. Keep it, sir.
I do what?
Well done.
Sorry?
You're having a proper mentality, strong mentality.
Okay, thank you. I wish I had a motorbike in Sri Lanka because it's so dangerous and exciting, because that's what I loved. I loved in London, was it was so dangerous. Anyway, I wrote some freelance articles.
Excuse me, sir.
Yeah?
Yeah, Minaza has a question. Could you?
Oh, okay. Okay.
What is it like? Your interest in writing inspired you to become a journalist, or was it?
Yes. I became interested in writing, and I got into a college just like you, doing a postgraduate course just like you, I suspect, in journalism, and particularly magazine journalism. And it was while I was on that course that, I won't tell you about riding. And I was on that course, and I was offered a job. I'd become interested in editing a magazine because we had a student news magazine. And it's a really good way of learning how to be a journalist, was to have our own magazine. And I was on the course, and we had this newspaper, and somebody said, who would like to be editor of the magazine? And I don't know why I did this, but I put my hand up. And that was the first magazine that I edited. And I haven't stopped editing magazines since then, because I loved the whole idea of putting together a magazine and building a team and understanding who the reader is. Now, some of you will be interested in that, and some of you won't. And after that, I became an editor. After that, I became an editor. And this is where the specialist came in. And this is the last on Types of Magazine. This was a specialist magazine, again, towards woodworking. And Hussein, that's when my experience as a woodworker helped. And I did become a woodworker all the time. And that was when I began to be a specialist in just woodworking. And it was then, thinking about regulars, it was then that I chose a columnist to write a column for the magazine. And it was the most important publishing decision I have ever made. And the journalist, he was a woodworker. He was a woodworker who used no electricity, and he lived in the middle of nowhere in his fabulous cottage. And he wrote for the magazine, and he had the most influence on that magazine than anybody else. And of all the things, and I've launched other magazines, of all the things I've done in publishing, that was the most important thing. Now I'm about to have a coffee, and I wonder if it's a good time to have a short break. Milroy, what do you think?
Yeah, I was also thinking, like, you also mentioned getting into
Sorry, I can't hear. I think you have to have the microphone closer.
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yeah, very well.
Right. I was thinking how you also said you got involved in broadcast media as well, right?
In what media?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Radio and all that.
Well, radio was because I wanted to be a journalist, and I haven't done. I should do more radio. I always thought that I should do more radio, but it was only because I was university, and radio seemed like the best way to learn about news reporting, and it was. But I haven't done that. Now, from the perspective of social media and other media, it's because I was doing specialist magazines, and I published magazines that are produced for social media. So both to produce the magazine digitally and to be involved in social media. Does that make sense? Or was it? Is that your question?
I'm so sorry. Can you repeat that? I'm really sorry.
Sorry, I can't hear you.
I'm sorry. Can you repeat that?
Oh no, I was. Hold a second. You're Sheeny, aren't you?
No, that's Minaza. Minaza.
Oh no. You've changed shirts. There's another lady with a white shirt. You've swapped shirts. This isn't fair. Anyway, and you haven't got a woolly hat or anything like that.
There are two mics going on here.
Oh, are there? Oh, there are two mics. Okay. So, okay. So anyway, the one nearer the back, the one of you who's nearer the back, what's your name? Sorry?
Minaza.
Minaza. Okay, Minaza. Minaza, I think you arrived after I took the names down.
Right.
Yeah? Sorry, Minaza, what was your question?
I was asking, so you said you were interested in getting in like radio, right? So like as a writer, what do you feel is the experience, like the difference in radio and content media, like print media?
Well, essentially, there's no difference. The pieces that you produce for social media are quite often shorter, but some of the radio programs are longer. So if you do a feature for a radio program or something like that, then you will might well write more words than you would for an article. And you can tell that, it's quite easy to tell. You work out how long the radio lasts, and then you count the number of words that it takes to produce that, to write that article. And then you read the article that you have written, and you work out how long it takes to read. I do a lot of talks these days, so I do a lot, not necessarily on journalism, but actually about head injuries. And so I do a lot of that sort of thing, of researching a topic and then reading out what I've written, but also at the same time being impulsive and changing the subject. And that's something you can do in radio that you can't do, particularly in radio, that you can't do in the written word, because you can suddenly change the subject and you can be more impulsive and more, as long as it's live, you can be more impulsive. I don't think, to be honest, I don't think there's that much difference. Oh, I have got, you're Mini, aren't you? You're Mini? Is that right?
You think that you could be more impulsive with radio?
Yes, definitely. But only if it's live, because you can react to what is being said and what happens. But you can be impulsive writing, but not as easily or not as obviously. I mean, you can write about different subjects that don't seem to have an interest to what you've written, and that, I suppose, is impulsive. And you can sort of go off on a different subject. So no, it is different. You'll probably do a lot more interviews on radio. So what you do on radio is you'll interview somebody, and then you will put it into the radio program, and it'll be exactly what they say rather than edited in any way. So when you write and you interview somebody, now a lot of Sri Lankan, it's quite common in Sri Lanka, more common than it is in the UK, that you do interviews. So you do an article, and I'm not sure where I have an example of this, but a lot of your articles, the interview is what we would call a Q&A, in that there's a question and then an answer. And I'm not all that keen on that, because it's good once in a while, occasionally, but doing it all the time can be a bit boring. And it means you don't have an opportunity to comment about what the person who you're interviewing has said. It's very easy to do, it's very quick, because what you do is you just put the question and then you put the answer. What is better really is if you have more of the answers to your question are more built in to the feature. And so, you can make your own comments, and you can actually change what you can put. So say somebody says something, you can use it, but not with quote marks on it. So you can almost use what they've said, but without it being seen as does that make sense, Minnie?
You mean like prepare it?
Sorry?
You mean like have it prepared?
What do I mean? I'm trying to find an example in an article here in one of your magazines. Okay, they're doing business magazine, I remember. So this article, and I can't remember which of you, his father works for, which of you works for the publishing company that produces Business Today? Is that right? Okay.
Can you repeat that again?
Which of your students' father works for Business Today?
Oh, mine, Ishini.
That's Ishini.
Okay, Ishini, can you speak? Can I say?
Yeah.
Now, in the article about recent article about now it's going to Saubagaye Dekma. He's a minister. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. Now there's a long article about him here. Okay. There.
Yeah.
It has a quite a long piece at the beginning describing who he is and what he's done. Yeah? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. Now in here,
Passion with a mission.
sorry,
His passion with a mission.
he was, sorry, I didn't get that.
He is with a passion towards a mission.
Okay. The rest of the article is like this, and it's questions and answers. Now his answers are very long there. And I would personally, because there are quite a lot of articles done like this, and here's another one of Saman Upasma. It's done in a very similar style. Now it works well some of the time, but I wouldn't repeat it all the time. And what I would do is I would combine what he has said into what we have asked, so that our questions, we probably wouldn't include the questions we've asked. We would write about the answers that he's given and build it more into the feature. And that's something in radio, it's slightly different because the answer comes straight out of a question. In print, you can combine the answers more easily into the article, and it makes it more into a feature than it does into what we would call a Q&A. Now, there's no problem with Q&As, and it's a very efficient and personal way of doing things. But to me, I prefer to have some articles with Q&A, maybe one or two in an issue of a magazine, and then one which are just features when the answers are built into the article. And it's a good exercise for you to try both ways of doing an article, and doing one that's a Q&A, and thinking about it, that would be a really good exercise for you to do, is to interview somebody and do it both as a Q&A where you put your question and you put their answer, and also to do an article where there are no Q&As, but their answers are built into the article. Does that make sense? Minnie, does that make?
Yeah,
Yeah?
so it's basically like in print media, you can make it shorter and manipulate the words into like basically.
In theory, you can't manipulate the words that you put in quote marks. So if you put anything in quote marks from an interview, you mustn't adjust the words.
Yeah, I mean, like put it in quote, but like I mean, like just you could shorten it, like the length, right?
Yes,
The
yes,
paragraph.
absolutely. You can shorten the quote.
Manipulate
So
is probably not the word, but
No. It means that you can have two sentences or one sentence of the quote in quote marks, but the rest of the answer that person gives, you can play around and you don't say that it's that person who said it.
yeah,
So
play-
you can you can interpret it into your own words, or you can use their words, so long as you don't give the idea, the implication that they've said it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I was also thinking like in print media, it's more like open to interpretation sometimes. There's more chance
Yes.
for that.
Yes, absolutely. You have more opportunity for open interpretation in print because you have more time to think about it. You can do that on radio. Of course, you can do it on radio because you're producing article. Effectively, a program is often an article, and so you can use the quotes. But it's not quite as easy. It's not quite as easy to play around with things as it is. It's very similar, very, very similar. And that's why magazines and radio are very similar. And you can often combine. The thing with online or social media is everything's much shorter. So everything has to be in much shorter pieces because it's read more quickly. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but like despite I mean like having been used to print media for a long time and then switching to broadcast,
yeah, you could do that easily, quite easily. I know there are plenty of people who write and broadcast, plenty of people. You as a student, it would be more difficult. Now, the question is it better to start with radio or better to start with print? And that's a really interesting question. When I was training, it was more difficult to get jobs in radio than it was in print. So, but I'm not sure if that's still the case. Probably still the case. And in radio, you have to learn more specialist skills of using cameras and using radio recorders, all those sort of things. It's more difficult. So probably print is still the best way to learn those. Does that make sense?
yeah.
I think it might be time for a cup of coffee.
Right.
because
sorry.
mainly because my girlfriend has made me a cup of coffee and it's still
Okay.
and it's still hot, but it won't be hot for much later.
Right.
So it's 11:15 now. I presume it's 11:15 in Colombo as well. And perhaps we start again at about 11. Nora, that sounds okay? Or
sure.
Minnie, does that sound okay?
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry for holding you up for so long.
That's okay. This is great fun. I'm really enjoying this. Really enjoying this. Yeah. I'd like to tell you more about when I was a dispatch rider because there were lots of accidents, but I don't think it's very relevant to what you want to hear.
I'd love to hear it regardless.
Okay, but I'm not sure everyone does, Minnie. If you do, I'll tell you, but it was very exciting and I was knocked off my motorbike quite a few times, but I've lived. Do you have Deliveroo in and things like that, taking food in bicycles? Just Eats? Do you have Just Eats and ways of delivering food by bicycle? Takeaway?
Well,
Anyway, I did that for a while, and that was even more exciting because it was even more dangerous. Anyway, enough. Time for coffee.
okay.
Perhaps just I'll talk to you at 11. Okay.